Hello, hello, and welcome to Merchandise Paradise here with me, JT. And as you can see, I am not alone. I am here with a very special guest for this edition. It's Will Hadcroft. Hello.
Hey!
Hooray!
Greetings from Bolton.
All the way from Bolton, indeed, which is in the northwest of England, isn't it, love?
Indeed.
Listen, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of MP. It is fabulous to see you. And we're going to be coming... You're going to be here basically to talk about your audio book from BBC Audio, which is The Resurrection Plant, which is out here. Yeah, ta-da! We've all got copies. If you haven't got copies, then hopefully this show will make you want to get one as well.
If you haven't got one, why not? That's the question.
Exactly. Why not? But I want to start, actually, Will, by asking you, first of all, I mean, you are a Doctor Who fan of a certain age, as am I. Yes, we won't say any more on that one. But so what are your memories? Your initial memories of Doctor Who from back in the day?
Right, back in the day. Well, if we're going right back to the earliest memory, well, I was born in 1970, so just after John Pertwee arrived on Earth, I arrived on Earth.
Yes.
And I used to say that my earliest memory was seeing a Dalek getting hysterical and exploding and bursting into flames, which would be death to the Daleks.
Death to the Daleks, yeah.
So I would have been 4 when that was broadcast. But I didn't realise it until I saw it again years later. That I was watching The Time Monster on DVD. See, The Time Monster does not have a great reputation amongst fans.
No, it doesn't.
So I never bought the VHS when it came out, and I didn't have UK Gold or any of that stuff. So I never saw it for years. And then I saw it going cheap in HMV or somewhere. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to get it. I think it was in with Horns and Nymon and something else. It was like a box set thing.
It was the Myths and Legends box, wasn't it?
That's it, Myths and Legends. So I thought, you know what, I remember Horns and Nymon when I was 9, and I loved it then. And the unit one, what was the other one? There was the Horns and was it Underworld? The other one,
Underworld, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't mind that if I'm in the right mood either. So when I got to the Time Monster, I thought, all right, here we go, put it on, and I found that I actually really rather enjoyed the Time Monster. But when we got to the Chronivore, you've got this guy dressed in a white blanket and white plimsolls being swung around on Kirby wires. It was that screeching sound, that sound effect that went with it, and like the flickering flames and all of that. Yeah, it hit me. I thought, my word, I remember this.
Oh right,
it hit me like a bolt out of the blue. I remember being scared to death of it. So I can now say that my earliest Doctor Who memory is the Time Monster, which places me at 2 years of age, if that's true.
That's amazing that has that image, if you like, stayed with you, and it was earlier than what you actually thought. It just came back to you while watching it on the DVD. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really struck me. I thought I can remember being frightened to death of this thing. I mean, obviously, it's funny to watch it as an adult the way it looks now, but to a 2-year-old, it was terrifying, and it was that sound really that was frightening. And also, it is a strange thing, for a child to see that on television, this weird thing flying around and everybody scared stiff, in the scene.
Of course. Yeah.
So after that, we go into Tom Baker. Oh, there's the Death to the Daleks memory. Then into Tom Baker, and I had a really vivid nightmare of, I can see it now. I'm 4 years old, crouching down behind this rock on this barren landscape, which was inspired by Dartmoor, and the Sontaran. And again, you look at that thing now, and it's this funny, spindly, cobbled together. It looks like it's been all dragged out of somebody's shed and put together. Yeah. Whereas at age 4, this thing gliding around and these wires come flying out and coil people up and drag them away was terrifying. And I had a nightmare. I can remember holding my breath by this rock in the dream, and I hope it doesn't see me. I hope it doesn't see me. So that was my first Doctor Who inspired nightmare.
Wow.
Another one, another nightmare was would have been the Seeds of Doom. I can remember having a nightmare of somebody falling into this thing with blades in,
A
getting chopped.
composter.
Yeah, but in my dream,
Yeah.
it was much more vivid than what was shown on screen.
Do you know what? You are not the only one to say that. There's lots of us of this age, of our age, that actually could swear that we saw the guy cut up and chopped up. Isn't that weird that we all have that? And it's totally. I remember being shocked when the VHS came out.
In my dream, there's a grill on a brick wall outside the building, and all these bits of person come out, all blood and all sorts of stuff, come pouring out the other end. And I was terrified of that.
That's brilliant.
It might have been the same story. I remember in the story climbing through like a tube, like air ducting, like they do in Genesis of the Daleks, so they climb through that air ducting. But in the dream, it became the tunnel of the title sequence. The tube.
Oh,
I was stuck in that. in the
closing
credits.
Do you know that's something you should use possibly for a book? That's really, really good, because I mean, this is great. These are your memories of Doctor Who, which a lot of us will share, especially of our vintage, our age. I mean, it's very special times for Doctor Who there. Can I ask, as this is Merchandise Paradise, are you a collector of the Doctor Who merchandise or not?
Not a serious collector, no. When I was a child, I would have been more so. I can remember the Palitoy and Dennis Fisher toys. Was it Dennis Fisher that did that TARDIS?
Yes.
Where you had a cylinder inside.
Yes.
And you put the Doctor in. There it is. Yeah. That was a very strange toy, because I can remember playing with it and putting the Tom Baker doll in, shutting the doors and spinning the light round so the cylinder would spin round inside.
That's right, yeah.
With the green button on the top, I think. And then when you open the doors, he's gone, because there's two compartments in the cylinder.
Oh, don't give the game away. Don't give the game away. Well, that's cruel.
Sorry, folks. He is in the back, okay? The thing that used to get me every time I did that, I used to be thinking, but the TARDIS doesn't do this.
Do you know, that's weird as well, because I used to think the TARDIS doors don't pull open.
Yeah,
and they did on that, didn't they? You know,
there's that panel with all the writing on it. I used to think that as well.
That's right. Yeah. But even so, I mean, these toys were iconic back in the 70s. That's all we had for Doctor Who. They were ahead of their time in a sense, and they were brilliant. You know, they're much loved by all of us now. So you had all the Dennis Fisher toys there as well. You had, including K9. You can see an insert there from the adverts that we were all thrilled to see. And then, of course, you had the Palitoy talking Dalek. Did you have all these, or did you just...
Was the K9 done by Dennis Fisher and Palitoy?
Yes, there was a Dennis Fisher K9, which was smaller, which fitted the scale of the Dennis Fisher toys. Right. But the Palitoy talking K9 was much bigger as part of their... It was like the talking Batmobile and car they did.
The Palitoy one that I had then. I remember it being called Talking K9.
Oh, well, that's the Palitoy one, yeah.
And the Talking Dalek. I had both of those. Where you press the panel on K9's back. Affirmative, master.
That's absolutely, yeah. Happy days.
I love those. I read one or two Target books. I wasn't a brilliant reader because I was a slow reader. So if a book didn't, and I still am actually, if a book doesn't really grab me soon, I give up. But I remember reading Doctor Who and the Daleks, a David Whittaker novelization. A cousin gave me that. Said, "Oh, you might like this. You like Doctor Who, don't you? You might like this." And I remember being absolutely riveted by it because my mother had told me about William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, and I just about remembered John Pertwee. Yeah. And I knew about the Peter Cushing Doctor Who and the Daleks film. Yes. But I knew that this book wasn't that. It was the television serial novelized. And I was absolutely drawn in by it. And this is before the VHSs were released. So that was the only way you could experience that story. And my word, what a not just Terry Nation's script and David Whittaker's script editing on the story, but the way he novelized that book and wrote it in the first person from Ian Chesterton's point of view. That really grabbed me. That the other one that I was given was Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters, which is the Silurians by Malcolm Hulke, and that also the maturity of the way that was written. It wasn't written as a children's book. It was quite serious in tone. The way Malcolm Hulke showed you the perspective of the Silurians themselves, the world before the meteorite hit, and the thoughts of the Silurian that gets out of the base that is blundering around on the moors, and everything he's thinking. That really drew me in. And when the VHS finally came out for that one, it was a joy to see it, but I was slightly disappointed because the book drew you in a way that the episodes didn't. Yeah. And I can remember thinking, I want to do this. I want to be like David Whittaker and Malcolm Hulke. And then I read some of the Terence Dicks ones, of course. I can remember at school library, I'd get them out. Doctor Who, The Robots of Death. And because they were the hardbacks, there would be
lovely hardbacks,
a flap on the inside cover at the back with a photograph of Terence Dicks. And I used to think, I want to be like him when I grow up. So one or two other things, like the Tripods trilogy by John Christopher and Stig of the Dump by Clive King. These were the things that sowed the seeds, really, of me wanting to be a writer.
This is exactly what I wanted to ask you about, because I was wondering at some point if you were collecting something like the Target books, were they responsible for it? And you've answered that. That's fantastic, because it's so amazing. It's still amazing to me how many of us involved in Doctor Who today, how many of us are still loving Doctor Who today, how many of us are doing stuff like this in Doctor Who today or other things to deal with Doctor Who, and we grew up with it, have managed to make careers out of it. And you're another example of that. So you said that you were inspired by the books. How would you say that influence really played a part for you? I mean, was it a case of you read these things and you thought, absolutely, this is what I'm going to do? And did you take any more inspiration from reading all these lovely, lovely gems that we were given?
Well, certainly the desire to be a writer was my very earliest memories of being a writer. I would have been about 7. Okay. I remember the class that I was in. I was asked to write a story. We were all asked to write a story about the origins of an animal. You chose an animal, and then you describe why the animal has the name that it has. And I either chose it or I was given it, tortoise. And at age 7, I wrote this story about this animal called a tor, T-O-R, and he's built this contraption that he climbs inside so he can transport himself around, and he called it the Toys machine. I remember a 7-year-old came up with this.
Brilliant.
And then he gets stuck in it with his arms and legs coming out of the windows and his head coming out the door, and that's how he became the tortoise. And my teacher loved that. Yeah, and my mum was thrilled that my teacher was impressed by it. And then later on in the final year of primary school, my Doctor Who fanaticism had really kicked in by then. I did a project. We all had to do a project for leading up to Easter time, and it was you can be a pop star or an actor or whatever you want it to be, and you've got to do a project on it. So I slaughtered all my Doctor Who weeklies, which I'm appalled by now. But at the time, I cut out all photographs out, and I can remember writing about Scaroth, the last of the Jagroth, and Davros.
My goodness!
1979, you see. So it was the year before, the penultimate year.
Yes.
Of primary school. And I can remember the teacher showing the top 10 winners and saying, oh, look at this one. This one's about, it wouldn't be Adam Ant, would it? Because he wasn't there then. But
not quite.
From 79, this is ABBA or whoever, And
then
it moved on to something else. And then when it got down to the top 5, I was thinking, no, I'm not in it, I'm not in it. And it went down to 3 and then to 2. And I thought, well, I'm definitely not in it now. And then when she said, and the best one is, and she pulled out Doctor Who by me. Doctor Who.
Oh, well done, you.
Hadcroft. So, and she went through it and showed that I'd done a drawing of Julian Glover and then Stage 2, ripping the face off. Stage 3, the Jagroth, all coloured in felt tip.
Amazing.
Green with one eye, and
Yeah.
I won it, and the runners up got Cadbury's cream eggs, and I won the Easter egg. What staggers me looking back then, JT, looking back to it, is how low my self-esteem and self-confidence was.
Really?
It never occurred to me I would be number one.
Well, I think that's probably something to do with just being down to earth, and just be, oh well, but I mean, you got that. I mean, it must have been fantastic. But talking of Doctor Who weeklies and Doctor Who competitions, one of the reasons that I started this conversation by asking you if you were a collector, because it didn't look as if it worked, because I wondered if a certain item had got you into actually becoming addicted, like some of us were with merchandise, because
mine's a bit bare by comparison.
But what is this?
I have got this.
Oh, you've got a K9,
a bigger K9. Yeah.
But let's look at this, Will. What is this?
Oh, yeah, my word. I'm just looking at that gorgeous cover there with Tom Baker stood inside the TARDIS door there. Call the Shots. So this was, as you can see there on that image, it was to do with the picture strips and how a picture strip has a written word description of a gun noise. And what they wanted was you to write a new gun noise and send it in on a postcard. So
postcards.
Yeah, send it in on a postcard, those old days. And I couldn't think of anything. And I said to my mum, I can't think of anything. And she said, what about, and this was just off the top of her head, and she went, Zwisk. And I thought, right, now how do you write that down? So I spelled it out, ZWEEEEESK exclamation mark. I put that on a card, sent it off, and then forgot all about it. And then I remember it was the day, so this would have been, so it would be, was it 79 or 80?
It was 79.
Yeah. Well, I remember we had a I remember it vividly. We had a school trip to York. And we all went with our packed lunches on the train to York and walked around York Minster and all that. And then on the way back, I was reading an issue of Doctor Who Weekly on the train, and I can remember my teacher grinning at me and going, "Oh, typical! He's got Doctor Who Weekly." should have known. And then when I got home, my mother said, "Have you got the latest Doctor Who Weekly?" And I said, yeah. But it was actually the previous one.
Yeah.
She'd been to the newsagents and got the very latest. And she said, Have you got this one? And I said, "Oh, no, I haven't got that one yet. No." And she opened it up to where is it? Page 23, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here we go.
And there it is. And
she said, just have a look down that list. I didn't realize what she was telling me.
No, of course not. No. Yeah.
What does she want me to look down this list for? And I think it's, where are we? Yeah, a third of the way down the first column. I'll just get there.
That's it. And I've got a close-up of it. I've got a close-up of it there for you.
Yeah, William Hadcroft from Manchester. Yeah. So I was staggered at the sight of that. And because I just got home from the day trip and I was tired, I'd walked right past the mantelpiece in the living room and gone into the kitchen. And I hadn't noticed there was something on the mantelpiece.
No.
In a big square envelope. And my mother said, now go and have a look at the mantelpiece in the living room. I think you'll find there's something there.
I love it.
And I looked at this massive square envelope with my name on. And, when you're 9, you don't get packages sent to you with your name on.
No,
normally your parents have it in their name and they open it. So I opened it up, and I was a winner.
And is that your actual copy?
Yeah, I mean, it's falling to bits. Look at the state of it.
It's well loved, isn't it?
Look at that. It's really in bad shape. And I love the write up on the back. You've got the vortex there, and I think there's actually a link to the resurrection plant on this. If I can find it, it's track 16 on side 2.
Yep.
Gallifreyan Staser gun, 3 blasts from the deadly assassin.
That's right.
Now, if you play the resurrection plant, there is a scene where Dr. Jamie and somebody else are on the run, and you hear gun blasts in the distance. And it's that Gallifreyan Staser noise that we all know.
Exactly, that sharp, yeah.
It sounds like a sort of piano string, doesn't it? And Jamie says, "What's that? What's that?" And the doctor says, "That's a Gallifreyan Staser gun." And then after the third blast, he goes, 3 blasts. And that's a direct reference to that record. Gallifreyan Staser, 3 blasts.
It's one of those things, Will, that you've snuck in, because we're going to talk about obviously the story in a minute. But it's one of those things where when you know, because it's like an Easter egg on this audio, isn't it? Yeah. You put that in, you go, hang on a minute, is that deliberate? So I'm glad you've actually talked about it, because it was deliberate. The actual. And it's so sweet. It's tight. You've tied that up with your competition from Doctor Who Weekly, your prize from there, into your first audio book. And I think that is just so sweet. It's just all the way, a circle, isn't it? It's come all the way around.
It's audio to audio.
Absolutely.
A record to a CD,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just brilliant, because it provides that little sort of romance that can happen within Doctor Who circles here. That's fantastic. So just to explain that was the prize from a Doctor Who Weekly comic. On the left-hand side there, as I've been shown on the graphic, that was the issue where the Doctor Who sound effects competition was actually launched for Call the Shots, as Will told us. And on the right-hand side, that's the edition that Will's name appeared in, because he was one of many, many people that won that prize on that one. Fantastic there.
100, I think. One of 100.
I think there was 100 people there, yeah, and you were in there. I mean, that's a thrill, isn't it? I remember seeing my name for the first time.
First time, JC, I saw my name in print and in a publication. So you can imagine the psychological effect of that at age 9.
Totally. Oh, totally. I mean, a lot of us saw our names first in print through to the wonderful Doctor Who Weekly, wasn't it? I mean, it was a completely different world. It was wonderful. So listen, since you've come to the fore, as it were, through the audiobook and what have you, you have been busy, and Doctor Who has played an important part recently, but all through your life as well, isn't it? And I'll tell you something, even though you and I have been chatting for about a year or something now, I think, and we've been, exchanging messages and what have you. The first time we actually met was earlier this year, in April this year, when we met face to face in Blackpool. Now, Blackpool's played a special part in most of our generation's lives, isn't it? Because of the original exhibition. And that was something you managed to get to continually as well, wasn't it?
It was. I absolutely loved it. As everyone who's ever went to that, they all tell the same story. A very... I don't know how to describe it, because it's, you think, well, you're just walking around an exhibition, but no, it was more than that. I think it was the fact that it was in a cellar that made it different to all the others, because you had that big police box, oversized police box exterior. I can even the lead up to it, I vividly remember where you'd be going past Louis Tussauds on the corner, and then you'd have the cafe on the end, and then you'd have a square sign with the diamond logo in it and an arrow pointing Doctor Who round the corner, and you'd just get little bits of the theme tune filtering round the corner. You'd pick it up as you were approaching, and just the hairs going up on the back of your neck as you realise this is it. And then you turn the corner, there it is in all its glory, and then going down those very steep steps into this dark corridor, and all those sound effects and the music cues and various monsters and things in the exhibition cases, and then it opens out into that mock-up of the control room with those railings around the console to stop you touching it. I used to have the column would go up and down, and the TARDIS noise would come on, so you felt like you were being transported inside the TARDIS somewhere.
Yeah,
I can't really. It's one of those things where if you know, you know. It's
you were there.
Yeah, even me describing it doesn't encapsulate what it felt like. It's an experience, really. I hear about Longleat, and I went to the second Blackpool one.
Yeah,
and I love that, but it didn't have it. It didn't have that feeling that the original Blackpool exhibition had. I used to notice all little bits of detail on that police box exterior. The way you had the word TARDIS down the posts in that
That's
kind of computery lettering.
Yeah.
And I remember at the top, the signage at the top said police public call box, but on the side it said police BBC TV box. Little things like that have stayed with me. And then, of course, you get to the shop after you've come out the other
legendary merchandise shop. Oh yes,
yeah. And that little monitor with Tom Baker on it or somebody going, I don't mind you telling all your friends about it,
Yes, exactly.
I'd just be glued to that. And then, was it after the regeneration? They showed the regeneration on it. I think it was that last scene from Logopolis. That was the shot. And I can remember standing there watching that over and over and drinking it in, because I had no other way of experiencing that scene. That was profound. That when I saw Logopolis, it was profound, the effect on me. So watching that, I'd stay there for as long as I could, watching that over and over on that little monitor. But I also met Colin Baker in there. I don't know if that's one of your later questions or
no. Carry on. No, it's
tell you now.
Go, tell me now.
So it was after the Twin Dilemma had aired. So Twin Dilemma aired in March '84.
Yeah.
And I had didn't have a video recorder at that time, so I had a cassette recorder, and I would press play and record, put it by the speaker, and tape record the audio soundtrack as it was playing live.
Oh yes.
And capture it. So I knew huge chunks of the Twin Dilemma by heart by the time August 1984 rolled up. And because of those memories of listening to it as purely as an audio, I can't join in when fans are rubbishing the story the way they do. I know it's cheap. I know Mestor looks rubbish. I know it's over the top. All the things that people say about it, I know they are true. But I have memories of loving this story just from the voices and the sounds.
Wow.
And of course, you make up your own. You can't remember that Mestor looked rubbish, so you make him look worse in your imagination.
Yeah.
So I really loved the Twin Dilemma for months after. And I still have a feeling for it now, actually, even though I know it is quite poor.
Each to their own, though, Will.
Yeah, I'm certainly not denying the things that people say about it. They are all true, but I have another feeling that sits alongside those feelings. So we went to Blackpool August 1984. So we went. The routine always was we would go on the beach, and then at a certain point, the family would go down to the pleasure beach. And by this time, I was 14. So I'd say to my mum, "Do you mind if I just stay in the exhibition while you're all down there?" And she'd say, I remember she said to me, "Now, you're not going to go wandering off, are you, while we're down there?" And I did a bit of a Colin Baker, wander off. And so she went, "No, you wouldn't."
No.
And then they went back to the beach. Now, unbeknownst to us, Colin Baker is down on the pleasure beach at that moment.
Oh, of course.
Opening the Space Invader ride.
Space Invader ride, yeah.
In full costume. So I'm going down into the Doctor Who exhibition, and then the lady in the shop is fussing around like mad, making sure everything looks good, because she knows he's down there. And although there hasn't been a visit scheduled to the exhibition, he's very likely to show up. So they were in a bit of a flap. I remember that.
Oh, yes.
And I'm in the shop wondering if he'll come while I'm there. Imagine that. If he comes while I'm in here, imagine that. And I was just obsessing over it and going over bits of dialogue from the Twin Dilemma. So I thought I'm going to say a line to him from the Twin Dilemma to impress him. And then suddenly my mother comes running down the stairs in this navy blue swimsuit thing, covered in dry sand, in hysterics, going, William, Doctor Who's here, Doctor Who's here. So she'd heard all the commotion outside as he'd arrived at the front, gone to see what it was. and then run in through the back so she could get through the crowds. And just as she said, "Doctor Who's here," I could hear this voice on the other side in the TARDIS control room talking to the steward who was with him. And he was looking at one of the exhibits, and I just heard this voice going, "Oh, now you wouldn't want to see that on a dark night, would you?" And I remember that voice is unmistakable, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's him. And then he just walked out of the shadows into the shop in full costume. Just went, "Hello," the way he does. And I can remember just all this business about memorizing quotes, you know. I was just like that.
Oh, bless you.
My mother had got the single because every time the Doctor changed, they reissued the single record of the theme music, the Peter Howell theme. So you had Tom Baker doffing his hat, then Peter Davison stood outside the TARDIS, and then Colin Baker in a kind of thoughtful pose. So I bought Colin Baker one, going back to collecting, like you were talking about earlier. My mother used to say, "Why do you need 3 copies of the same record?"
Oh, yes.
You can have a different B-side, you know, it's exactly the same. And I'd say, but it's got to have the current Doctor. So I just bought the Colin Baker version of the single, and my mum just snatched it out of my hand, thinking on her feet really, and just said, "Will you sign my lad's record, please?" And he went, "Certainly," and he signed it off to me. And I treasured that. I would show you that, but unfortunately, I do still have the single, but the felt tip pen has completely gone.
Has it?
After all these years,
wow.
4 decades old, you know, it's faded off completely. There's no point in showing it to you.
What a shame! What a shame! You should have got him to sign it again, because firstly, let me just say, look at this. This is you. Yeah. In around about 84 and 85, at the Blackpool exhibition on the left there, with the oversized police box, which of course was, for our foreign viewers, this was the entrance to the Doctor Who exhibition, the original Doctor Who exhibition in Blackpool, which is so fondly remembered by an entire couple of generations. Because for 10 years, it was an absolute mecca. Every summer you had to go to Blackpool, and then there you are, more recently on the right, and that's what it is now, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's what I am now, unfortunately. I look like a Slovene in that picture.
Not at all.
There might be a zip on my forehead if you look close enough. But, that shoe shop, I remember, that's the other thing, that everybody who ever went there talks about this. There was no announcement that they were closing that place.
No, there wasn't.
And 85 was the last time I went, I think. So that would have been that was the year they did the Children in Need thing, isn't it? So
that's right.
There's all this footage of the Children in Need visit, but no footage of the visit when I was there, or even any photographs of it. I haven't found any. Anyway, so 1986 rolls up, and we're at Blackpool. I'm going to go to the Doctor Who exhibition and catch you up at the Pleasure Beach later. That was always the plan. And I can just remember turning round that corner, because I was thinking, I can't hear the music. I can't hear the theme tune. Then turning around the corner, and it's just gone.
Yeah,
and it was a Laurel and Hardy exhibition, as I remember. Had replaced it initially, and then a couple of years later that went as well, and then it's a shoe seller now, and just the feeling, right to the pit of my stomach, like a dagger through the heart. It's gone, and I'm sure everybody who goes to Blackpool who remembers that thing, they always go and stand on that corner on their visit to Blackpool. I do. My wife thinks it's hilarious that I have to go and stand and look at the shoe seller. She knows why I'm doing it, but she just says, "You've all got this gene, you lot. You've all got this gene."
Well, she's not far wrong, is she?
You all do the same things. Yeah.
Well, we do. I mean, it's like now we're going there. It's like people possibly may go to Graceland for the Elvis. But we're going there to actually honor where this thing was, because we spent so much time there. A huge amount of us of a certain age went. As I say, it was the Mecca every single year for 10 years. I grew up going to that thing. Always, every single year, having to say to my mum and my dad, we've got to go to Blackpool. I mean, it became part of the whole year's plan of what to do with the kids, and we would have to go every single year. So I understand exactly what you're saying about what would have happened in '86. I'd actually was lucky, Will, because I'd heard the thing wasn't coming back after 1985, and after getting over the initial shock of that, didn't go again for years because there was no reason to go to Blackpool for years and years and years. But I'll tell you something as well. When you're saying that people were actually, they go to where the exhibition used to stand, and they stand on that street corner and they get the pictures taken, it's absolutely true. Because as I say, Will and I were in Blackpool in April for a brand new convention which took place celebrating 60 years of our beloved Time Lord, called Invasion Blackpool. And in the days leading up to it, especially the day before, you could tell who was coming to the convention because they were all on that street corner getting their picture taken. And it was quite busy. Yeah, there were loads and loads of people there. So here we go. This is Invasion Blackpool. So here is a couple of pictures of you. Now, I'm quite familiar with the guy that you have your picture taken with there on the right, that handsome fellow there. But there you are with another handsome gentleman there on the left-hand side. Who's that?
That's Mr. Andy Lane. Yeah. And he introduced it because I'd when Colin was on the panel, I related the story about the exhibition from the audience.
Did you?
And he knew Will Hadcroft wrote the Resurrection Plan, so we'd had exchanges on Twitter, but he'd never met me.
Yeah.
And then when I related that story, he then knew who I was. Yes. So after the panel was over, he came straight up to me and introduced himself. Will Hadcroft? I said, yeah, Andy Lane. Brilliant, lovely to meet you, and his lovely wife as well.
Yeah,
and that was my first experience of being a guest at a convention. So it was very strange to go behind the scenes and be in the green room and all of that, and sit next to Colin Baker eating a sandwich. You know, but when you again connecting it back up to when I was 14, you know, he wanders in the Blackpool exhibition, and I'm there at 14, completely obsessed with the Twin Dilemma, and then, you know, now in my early 50s, we're sat at the same table eating a sandwich or whatever it was. Remarkable, really. And obviously, all fans who get involved in Doctor Who in some way all tell that story. It is a bizarre feeling to go from loving something so much to being part of it in some small way. Totally. And mixing with the stars. It's odd. There aren't many shows where you can do that, you know?
Yeah, I don't think there's any shows you can do that now, really, apart from outside the science fiction and fantasy world. I mean, you very kindly took part in a panel on the day, and here you are here with Andy Lane, David House, Stephen Gallagher, and host of that segment, Alan. And you were talking all about the BBC audios, and you were obviously talking about your experiences with BBC Audio, and you were all talking about how to write the stories and what have you. And as you said there, this was your first convention appearance. How was it being on that stage at that point with these guys talking about what is now your profession?
Well, like I say, you know, I mean, I'm sat there. You've got Andy Lane next to me. Next to him is it Alan Lear?
Yep.
Is that his name? Yeah. I even know his name. Is it from Hoylake and all of that?
That's right. Yeah.
And did he write a Big Finish or an audio visual that became a Big Finish or something like that?
I'm not too sure, actually, on that one. I'm not too sure.
I'm thinking
I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, it might be somebody else but if it is, it'd be interesting to know. But the point is, all these names that I've known for years, David Howe, you know, has been connected to Doctor Who for decades.
Well, before our time, slightly. Sorry, David.
Yeah. I mean, when they do documentaries about Doctor Who on television, he's always one of the talking heads in the documentary. You know, I know that name and I know that face, and I've known it for years. And then, of course, Steve Gallagher, Warriors Gates, had a profound effect on me at age 10. Such a surreal story, and so memorable, and so vivid, and so intelligent a story. And although Terminus suffers from its budget, the ideas and the concepts in that, you know, are quite mind-blowing. If you watch it for the concept and the story and ignore the Garm and the one or two.
Oh, bless the Garm.
But even talking to Stephen about that, you know, to find out the Garm was never meant to be seen. It was meant to be something in the shadows.
That's what he said, wasn't it? Yeah. That was a shocker, actually, wasn't it?
Tried to make this giant dog with glowing eyes and fully light.
Well, What didn't he say? It was something to do with that. He felt that the production team had to have their monster element, and there wasn't a traditional sort of Doctor Who style monster in it. Because I'd never known that. All the interviews I've read with Stephen over the years, and he basically tells you and the other panel and the people that are listening, it wasn't supposed to be seen. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all the way through that panel, I'm answering the questions from Alan and from the audience, and all the time I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I'm sat next to Andy Lane and Alan Lear and David J. Howe and Stephen Gallagher, who wrote Warrior's Gate.
Yeah.
Quite surreal. But you do start to adjust to it quite swiftly. By the end of it, I felt like I was one of them, I felt like an imposter at the start and like I was one of them by the end. Yeah.
Well, that was the whole thing about that whole panel as well, because it was really interesting seeing how, people like on the panel were talking about how they came about into the world of Doctor Who. We just recapped a little bit of that there as well. It leads me nicely on to the last few months since the Resurrection Planet has actually been published. So it's been out now for a little while.
Yeah.
And how has the initial reaction been to your first audio novel?
Well, it's been very positive. If anybody does not like it, they haven't said so. And then there's my own reaction to it. When it came out, you don't get sent like a preview copy or anything like that. There's no audio files coming through saying, here's how it's going, see what you think. I didn't hear it till it was published. So I had no idea what it was going to sound like.
Oh my goodness, right.
I knew that the sound design would have been good because BBC Audio, they hire really good people for that.
Yes.
I knew it would be a mixture of sounds and music. I knew that Fraser Hines was great as a reader. I knew he would deliver Patrick Troughton's Doctor very well.
So you knew that Fraser was going to narrate the story for you?
I knew a few months, and once they booked him, I knew it was definite. There was talk of Wendy Padbury doing it earlier than that.
Right.
And then, for whatever reason, it did become Fraser, and they booked him, and he did it. It might have been to do with not having the equipment to record at home, because that was still a thing at the time of an actor who would have to come into the studio.
I see.
It would be harder to set up at that point.
Right.
But they did, and he came in and he did it, and so I knew what it was likely to sound like. But my word, when I played it. One thing, when you hear that famous diddle-a-din, 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 and then he says, The Resurrection Planet by Will Hadcroft, read by Fraser Hines, you're going, my word, this is it. This is what I've been after for all these years, this is the dream.
Well, that's interesting you say that. You say you've been after this for all these years. How did this actually come about to write this audio book for BBC Audio and the official range of BBC Doctor Who stories?
Yeah. Well, it's quite a tale. I originally wrote it. I wrote 3 sample chapters, prose, and a synopsis for something called the Sanctity of Death. That was the original title, The Sanctity of Death. And I can't remember. I should really look through all my old paperwork and see if I could find out when it was. It was either the back end of the Virgin New Adventures, or it was BBC Books. Past Doctor Adventures. I can't remember which it was, but it was quite over 20 years ago, certainly.
Wow.
And I pitched it to them, and it was either rejected by BBC Books, or it may have been that Virgin were winding down because they lost the license, and they may have just simply returned it to me. I can't remember. But it was The Sanctity of Death, and I thought that was rather splendid title because it plays on the idea of if you die and then are resurrected back to life, and you die again and are resurrected again, and it's just round and round and round, and you're just being put to work in dangerous situations, and you get killed, and then when you're brought back, you're just put back to work again. I wanted it to be a kind of Dickensian sending children up the chimneys to clean the chimneys and getting stuck up there. That I wanted it to have that kind of flavor and essence to it. So if you were constantly being brought back and then sent back to work, then the sanctity of life wouldn't mean much. So I thought I'll call it The Sanctity of Death. So anyway, I'd been writing for fanzines, and I'd done a fan audio in the early 2000s for Gareth Preston's Fine Line series of Doctor Who's. So I was always wanting to, and then I had a chance meeting with John Ainsworth, the editor,
Wow.
my editor, and now a Big Finish producer. He was between jobs around about 2005, 6, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
And for a few months, got a job in the office where I was working, just to plug the gap.
No way.
An ordinary office job. And the person who had to train him up in the task was me. I didn't know who he was.
Unbelievable.
And I knew the name John Ainsworth, and I thought, I know that name from somewhere. So I said to
Only
him,
Doctor Who fans would get that feeling, wouldn't we?
said,
I know you. I know your
what
name.
What did you do before you did this, And he said, oh, I've edited some magazines, and I've done a bit of audio work.
He tried to be as ambiguous as he could, did he?
He says, I edited a magazine called Cult Times. Do you know about that?
Oh,
I said,
wow.
I bought that. And then he said, do you like Doctor Who at all? I said, yes. and he said, I take it you'll know about Big Finish Productions. I said, well, I've got half of them, because I'd got everything from Sounds of Time up to Zagreus, I think, and then I started to pick and choose after that, because I couldn't afford to keep up with it all. But I had all those very early ones. Yes. And he said, well, I've directed some of them. Okay. So
the penny drops.
Yeah, and so
fabulous.
I'd done a small press novel called Android about a robot schoolgirl called Android, and that had some modest success. So he knew I was a writer. He knew I was trying to take it seriously. Yeah. And everybody in that office job, when they found out, thought I was onto I've made it now. That they were all telling me, oh, you've cracked it now. You won't be here much longer. Well, it turned out that then John was able to return to Big Finish and to magazine editing, and he left the office, and I stayed there for a good number of years thereafter. So this is something that I would sort of say to aspiring writers, to this notion that it all suddenly happens, and 1 minute you're a pauper and the next minute you're insanely rich. It's all nonsense, and the idea that you just need that lucky break, and then all these doors will start opening for you, and it'll also not necessarily. But John always kept in touch, and he found there was a publisher called Tim Hurst who had Hurst Books. They sadly went out of business. But he recommended me to go and approach Tim Hurst for possibly a future for Android, you see. Then later on, I had my own little setup called FBS Publishing, which stands for Fabulous Books. And I asked John to help with the typesetting and the graphics, because I knew he had the InDesign program. I knew how to work that. So he came on board and did three books with us, doing the graphics and the typesetting.
Oh, wonderful.
So all of these things were kind of, I now think, looking back, was showing him I was serious about being a writer. I wasn't just a Doctor Who fan who imagined he could write. I was trying to do it. And we published a Terry Malloy book, Monty. His teddy bear he takes everywhere. Montmorency Montgomery Bear, it's called. And it's a bit like a sort of Winnie the Pooh story, where the story has this rhyming quality. Oh. And Paul Mars, the writer, who also does illustrations, did all the illustrations for that.
Wonderful.
So we published Terry Malloy. We published Colin Baker's Sixth Sense, which is his newspaper article collections. He writes for a free paper where he lives. So collection of that. And all sorts of stuff. So then I bumped into John after not seeing him for ages. We were at Big Finish Day 2018, and he was the steward for Jan Chappell, who was who played Callie at Blake
Callie.
7, and they were promoting some Blake 7 audios. And I just happened to say to John, if you're ever hiring new writers, don't forget me, will you?
Ah,
A throwaway remark like that.
yeah.
And then 1 year later, 1 month after my mother had passed away, I got the email. Michael Stevens, the producer of the audio originals, is looking for new writers. Would you like to pitch us some ideas?
Wow.
And I had 3, and one of them was The Sanctity of Death. And I was asked to develop that one. They changed the title almost immediately. This was something I'd vowed to myself. If I was asked to change things, I would just do it. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't be a prima donna. I would just do it, because I know the writers who are popular with editors are the ones who are easy to work with.
Oh, totally.
And, so I thought, right, I'm going to have a reputation for being easy to work with and not be, wanting all the credit. And so I thought, well, I don't really want to change the title, but because I think mine's better. But they'd seen the phrase "the resurrection plant" in the script, and they said that really sums up what it's about. The Sanctity of Death might be poetic and all of that,
and dramatic. Yeah,
it's not really telling you what's in the tin, is it? Whereas the resurrection plant tells you straight away. So I said, all right then. And then they asked for a 2-page breakdown, so 2 pages of A4, where you describe the entire story from start to finish. And then if they like that, they commission it. So you're not commissioned, straight away. You have to give them the story.
You have to go through an audition process, really.
Basically, yeah, you have to prove you can do it. And also, although I wasn't asked for it, I wrote one scene. I wrote the penultimate scene, which, without giving anything away, you'll know it. It's where the Doctor is in the office with Ren at the end, and they're comparing notes. And there's an exchange, a promise in a way, made between the two of them. And I wrote that scene first because I thought that was the most powerful of the whole thing, and sent that as well to sort of say it will be like this. And I was told when the story was complete that was Michael Stevens' favorite scene, that penultimate scene. So then several months of back and forth with John Ainsworth. I wrote far too much on the first draft.
Right.
I think it was meant to be. It's 10,000 words. That comes out in A4 at around about 20 A4 pages, and I'd written 30 A4 pages. So we had to hack it down between us to the right word count, and that was a real lesson that for me in keeping things concise. I had to ditch so much, but still keep the story the same story.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. If you had to take out so much, I mean, when you listen to this, you viewers, when you listen to this, it's actually, gosh, how can I describe this? This is a packed full story. I've got to be careful because I can't give anything away. It does have a lot of continuity in it, and yet it all contributes to said story. But it must have been difficult then trying to keep the magic, if you like, of this and how it flows well, if you had to cut so much out of your initial treatment.
Well, a lot of the stuff that was cut was character development stuff, the family that are in it. I had long scenes with them all dealing with a situation before the Doctor arrived. The little girl, I don't think this is giving anything away, the little girl who's killed at the beginning and then resurrected. The scene that leads up to her being killed was all there in the original thing.
Oh, I see. So whereas now it's described.
Yeah, we joined the story on the CD where she's brought back, aren't we? So you don't see it, you don't hear any of the preamble to that. So there were great chunks of stuff like that gone, but it's actually the process tightens it up. So like you say, it's a roller coaster ride, really. There are no boring bits in it.
There isn't. There really isn't, because I mean, obviously your edit there and your rewrite went really, really well, because the descriptions of what goes on, it sets a mystery, it sets a tone as to come along. Because when you get the Dr. Jamie and Zoe coming along to this, you are with them in a sense, because you haven't a clue what's going on. And although you might start as a Doctor Who fan to start picking up very early on, hang on a minute, this feels familiar. You know, it's not actually, you don't go for it as such, really. You let the story unwind with it. Was it your choice, Will, to go for a second Doctor story, or were you told to do a second Doctor story?
Well, I had, first of all, excuse me, the Sanctity of Death was the Seventh Doctor and Ace.
Okay.
Now this has a bearing on why certain aspects of the Resurrection Plant are so good, without giving it away.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
you know now what I mean.
Yes.
So it was the Seventh Doctor and Ace. So obviously, if you're writing the Seventh Doctor, he's very, very, he's Time's champion. He's this mysterious, ethereal character. He's possibly one of the very early Time Lords. All that Andrew Cartmel stuff, which was all, piled into the original idea.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the other two storylines were that I pitched. I knew one was a Colin Baker one.
Ooh.
I can't remember what the other one was. It may have been a Colin Baker one, and a new Sylvester McCoy idea, and then the Sanctity of Death, which was also a Seventh Doctor idea. So I thought, well, I don't want to pitch one Doctor and two Doctors that are the same. So and then I had the light bulb moment regarding all the Time Lord stuff. What if it was the second Doctor before the events of the War Games?
I see.
Because that kind of chops it all up, doesn't it? It shakes the whole thing up. So you have the elements of the story that I originally conceived. But if you've got a Doctor who is secretive, doesn't want people to know he's a Time Lord, not even his companions, then it adds a layer there that wasn't there before. So you can tell exactly the same story, but there are things that pertain to the Doctor himself that just add that extra layer. And it really makes it, I think, that aspect to it.
I'm going to agree with that, because when I'm listening to this, when I'm on my first listen, and I'm about 10, 20 minutes towards the end of this, Will.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, and I'm glad you've said that, I'm thinking this is more a Seventh Doctor story, because it does get into this real heavy mystery stuff that we got certainly from season 26 or the middle of 25, but certainly into 26 onwards.
Yeah.
And this, so you answered the next question I was going to ask you about why the story was hinting at certain aspects where in that era we never went to, and in today they're still not unrevealed. But you've already mentioned that, because it was supposed to be all this mystery surrounding the Seventh Doctor, but it actually does work beautifully for the second Doctor in this story as well, because of course he knows all this at the time. He just didn't want anybody else to. So it's sort of it gives him a new side to the character.
In the mythology, he's on the run from his own people. He does not want anyone to know who he is or what he is or where he is. So if there was a threat to that, how far would he go to avoid it? How far would he go? Normally, he would top the baddie and then move on. But if the baddie could expose him, would he be so willing to top him then? And that was very interesting to play with, all of that. And then, of course, you've got all the kind of the recent alterations to the mythology in the modern series. And I thought, well, I don't want to miss all of that out, really, because although I'm not keen on some of it, I know that it is there. And if you accept the modern series, then it is canon. So I thought I will sort of just hint a little bit at that, but not really go into it much, because it is a classic era story at the end of the day. It
Absolutely.
doesn't really need to have any modern era stuff in it at all. But when I was writing it, some of the stuff that was going on television was still quite fresh. And I thought, how can I deal with some of these themes without referencing some of this other stuff? So I play around with that a little bit. And some people have said to me that they really like that. The fact that there are things that are in it that definitely wouldn't have been in it in 1969. because they just hadn't been thought of. They weren't in the actual Doctor Who program at that time, whereas they are in the modern one. So juggling all of that was quite fun, but still keeping it. It had to feel like a second Doctor story and like it was from the classic series, and it does.
Absolutely. I mean, do you find that when it comes to actually writing the story, do you find that you are allowed to actually play with this sort of stuff? I mean, you're talking there. I mean, I got this as a second Doctor story, albeit in a sort of new missing adventures style, which I think these things are. I think they're just continuations to just on audio.
Yeah.
And then you hit in the remaining, 15, 20 minutes of the story, you're hit with all this mythology, if you will, all these hints of things that could be or possibly will be, and you can tie it in with that. Do you find that a real benefit with hindsight? Do you find being able to say, right, okay, I can write about that as a nod and a wink? Or do you think...
It's certainly, if you're into that kind of thing, not all fans are. Some fans don't want a retrospective story. They want brand new, the TARDIS is going forwards, it's progressive. But whereas providing it's done the right way, I don't mind a nod and a wink to the past and little bits of throwaway remarks that you either get or you don't. And they're not really that important to the story. But there'll be people out there, like the Gallifreyan stays, a sound effect, that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
You either, I don't even know if Michael Stevens and John Ainsworth noticed that. They never said it. It was in the notes that I got back. There was nothing going, oh, yes, I know what that is. So it might have completely bypassed them for all I know. But people like yourself saw it straight away. It's a reference to the sound effects record.
Yes.
And I love doing that, and I love it when it appears in other things if it's done the right way. There are sometimes the program can reference itself, and it becomes such a distraction that it's kind of sending itself up. Oh, it's like nod, nod, wink, wink. Viewers
all the way through. Yeah.
You're thinking, it's like the characters should not be aware that they're in a television program called Doctor Who. And sometimes on screen, in certain eras, you do get that kind of feeling. It's almost like they know they're on television,
Yeah.
And some of the dialogue and in jokes and stuff, and it just interferes too much with the story. So I certainly wouldn't want to go down that road. I wouldn't want it to be a distraction. If anything, it should add to it and make you smile. But if you're going, they're referencing that story from, or it's like jokes about cracking jokes about why does everybody speak English, or all these corridors look the same to me, referencing the fact that it's made on the cheap, basically. And whilst you can grin and go ho ho ho, there's an episode in the classic series where I think it might be Battlefield, where Ace says to the Doctor, have you never gone anywhere where nobody wants to kill you, or something like that? Little joke.
You know any nice people?
Yeah, everywhere they land, there's a big adventure, and they're all trying to kill him. I would prefer that not to be kind of acknowledged within the program, even though it's done as a joke. And I know some people enjoy that kind of thing, but it's not for me, really. It's not for me. So doing it in my own story, I was very careful what the tone of it was, how far I went with those kinds of things. And there's a lot of references to family and friends in it.
Totally, yeah.
There's the girl in it, Ray Imai. That's an anagram of Marie, and Marie is my stepdaughter, who she died in 2018 of cancer.
Oh, right.
So Coral is Carol. That's my wife.
Right.
The little boy Wetam is the husband Wetam is Matthew backwards, and Matthew is my little brother.
I'll have to look at the insert a little bit closely, aren't I? If this had been in the Radio Times, I would have seen all that.
Yeah. And when I met Fraser at Derby, he was saying, "Why did you put all these crazy names in it?" There was, because he had a great deal of trouble
pronouncing.
Getting the pronunciations right. And there were discussions with Michael Stevens, I'm told. How do you pronounce this, Raima? Is that right? And they were sort of debating how you pronounce it.
Brilliant.
So I said, well, they're all anagrams and little references to family and friends. The Professor Marmory, you know the Gestalt creature, and one of the characters is Professor Marmory. That's a corruption of Margaret Mary, which is my mother. My mum died just before I was commissioned to write it, so I thought I want to reference her in it.
Yeah.
And on the inside cover, there's a dedication to her.
You do dedicate it to her as well, which is a lovely thing to do, isn't it? That's wonderful. I mean, she would have been so proud to have seen that, wouldn't she, as well?
Oh, she would. She had a hard time with me as a teenager because I now realize I'm on the autism spectrum, and at that time, quite clearly had Asperger's syndrome.
Which we didn't really know about back in the 80s either, did we?
No, but nobody knew about it.
No,
I was quite socially awkward and very obsessive, and Doctor Who was my anchor, it's my lifeline. And I talked about it daily, played the theme tune record daily, and it really got on her nerves. And she would be really quite stressed out at times because of the depth of the fanaticism and the obsession. But if I could have said, look, Mum, I've done it. Yeah. She would have been thrilled to bits to have a BBC product and it be a Doctor Who thing. But then I was thinking, if I'd have been commissioned, a year earlier, because she knew she was terminally ill.
Yeah. So
I could have said, hey, Mum, BBC Audio have commissioned me. That she would then have had the knowledge that she likely wouldn't have been around to actually.
That's very true.
See the end result.
Yeah,
so I have mixed feelings about that. There's part of
I get it.
Wouldn't it have been lovely for her to have known I was going to do it? But the other side of it is she would have known she would never have seen it. So maybe it's just as well, really, that she didn't know.
Yeah, I get you on that one. Yeah, it's one of those what if situations, isn't it? Really, it's the turn left syndrome, isn't it? Really, you just don't know. But I think somewhere deep down she knew that you were going to get it done at some point. She knew that was going to be coming along. I'm sure she did. I recommend it.
I've always been a bit of a late developer. When I left school with average grades and very low self-esteem. It took me ages to assert myself. In my 20s. And it's been a very gradual, slow development. So to get there, I was 49 when I was commissioned to write it, and 52 when it came out, August 2022. Yeah. COVID got in the way. Of course, the whole world went on hiatus for 2 years. It was meant to come out in 2020, but COVID put a stop to all that. So, August 2022 is when it came out. So, 52, 52. And I tell myself, because there's part of me that thinks, I could have been doing this 30 years ago. Because all the people who make their debut with this sort of thing, they tend to be in their 20s and 30s, They're not in their early 50s. But the other side of me thinks, well, there are some people who are trying to do this all their lives and never do it. It never happens. So I should count my blessings and be happy that it happened at all.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I am very grateful.
Yeah, you have to be. And there it is there. And it's on your shelf and you've got it. And it's on bookshelves and it's on, stockish shelves all around the country. And, of course, all around the world as well. So no, you have to be there. Would you say you were talking about there about your Asperger's and your autism there? Would you say that the writing has helped to hone what you understand about that aspect and how it affects you?
Yeah. Once I found out about it, I mean, you might remember there was an article in Doctor Who magazine by Gary Gillett called "The Fan Gene."
Wow.
He got into a bit of trouble for writing it because he quoted an actress without naming her. Right. And the actress got annoyed because all the fans will be wondering who it was who said it. But he references in that article changed my life really reading this article.
Wow.
Because I'd always known I was out of sync with the rest of the world, and at school didn't fit, and all of those things, but never knew why. And then he was at a Doctor Who convention, and he was talking to this actress at the bar, and he said, "What do you think it is that makes us all get together and do this?"
Yeah,
and she said, "Oh, I think you're all a little bit autistic, actually." And he quoted that in his article and said it made him research autism. And then he found Asperger's syndrome, the milder cousin to autism. And then started thinking about his own life and the fact that as a child he had a stutter and he was socially awkward and he was obsessed with Doctor Who and realized that there was some truth in what she'd said. So although it landed him in a bit of trouble at the time, because the actress wasn't happy that he quoted her, even though he didn't name her. She probably was expecting to be lynched by angry Doctor Who fans. Not the case. A lot of people were thinking, Asperger's syndrome, eh? And I was one of them. And then it kind of helped me compartmentalize aspects of my teen years and my childhood and kind of go, oh, it's that. I felt relief that I had a name for it,
Yeah.
And Android is, that was picked up by a company who specialise in Asperger's and autism because they recognised in the character of Android that she was like a child with Asperger's, and they took it on to sort of to help children with Asperger's. So even though when I wrote that book I didn't know about Asperger's, it's interesting that they saw that in it.
It really is. It shows you as well, doesn't it, Matt, Will? I remember that Fangene article you're talking about there, written by Gary. Yeah. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know anything about Asperger's or autism at that point. It was that article that made me think, oh, okay, you've got to be aware of this. Yeah. Because it suddenly explained quite a lot, especially in Doctor Who conventions where you were meeting people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And it was great to meet all these different people from what have you, but also in your professional life you're meeting people from all walks of life. And I think that was the real beginning of certainly our awareness as a generation, or anybody that was reading that magazine, to be able to, well, there's names for these things. But certainly that's when I became more and more aware of all these groups and all these things and now look where we are, where people are actually trained about this sort of stuff as well, and how to recognize it in each other or what have you, how to be accessible to people with these conditions in a professional working place. It's just so much of a change.
Yeah, and now in my day job, I work with men with autism. That's my day job.
Oh, really? Right.
Because I have a certain affinity with them. I feel that they're more severely affected than I have ever been. Right. It's full on autism and things like ADHD thrown into the mix as well. So some tricky behavioural things every now and then, but I have patience with them, and I feel like I've landed in a job that is perfect for me. Having worked in an office for 14 years that I did because it paid the bills, and I had no passion for it really. Right. And then to be made redundant and then land in this job, it's a perfect fit. So until the writing takes off, all these doors that are meant to open for me that everyone keeps telling me about, if they do open, until they do, I'll be working with the guys that I work with.
Well, that's fantastic, because it's still all experience for yourself as a writer to take in. There might be other avenues for you to write books based around the subject as well, to share your experiences and your knowledge on this. I'm glad you mentioned and brought us back to the books there. What's next for Will Hadcroft when it comes to audiobooks and what have you?
Well, it's interesting that I'll answer this in two parts. I get people coming up to me. When I was at Derby and I did sign the Resurrection Plant sitting next to Fraser, so that was fun.
That was handy.
We both signed it.
Good planning there.
A couple of guys came up to me, all very enthusiastic. Oh, we love it. We love your story. We love your story. And they brought the cover on its own. They brought the cover, so they bought it previously and brought the cover for me to sign. I signed it.
Lovely.
And one of them says, "So big finish next then, eh?" and I had to explain that it doesn't work like that. This idea that you get a break, it's all going to suddenly start happening. Look at my sweat. That's how hot it is, folks. Well, very rare summertime in Britain. Anyway, I've just seen it while we're recording. So
yeah, I'm sound.
I've lost my point now. So yeah, so big finish next day. This kind of thing, and I had to say that it will be lovely to write a full cast audio drama. I'd love to write a script and have it performed by different people, but it's not automatic.
No, of course not. No,
you can't go, oh, I've cracked it now. I've done my BBC Audio original. Next, big finish will be knocking on my door. Doesn't work like that at all. In fact, there's no guarantees that you will end up doing a second BBC Audio original. You can't live like that, going, right, we're on our way now, because you might not be on your way. But as it turns out, I was asked to do a second one.
Well done.
Thank you. So well, it's been held back. I think it's because of the 60th anniversary, really. There's so many other things coming out.
There is, yeah.
Because the Michael Stevens and John Ainsworth also oversee the Target novelization readings. And there's a lot of focus on those coming out in the 60th anniversary. We've had the Romans for William Hartnell, Seeds of Death for Troughton.
There's a lot of them. I'm a big fan of BBC Audio's Target range. I keep saying, I have said for a long time, I wish I'd start buying them, Will, from the first, and I didn't, because I knew what was going to happen. And I thought I was an adult. I thought, A, money, and B, shelf space. What an idiot. Don't think like an idiot. I should have got them because I hear they are brilliant. I have heard a couple already, of course, that I've managed to buy. Oh, I just wish I'd had them all. It's amazing. But there's a lot coming this year.
There's a lot. I know that Michael Stevens wants to do one Doctor per month. So
that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
The Doctor, I'm not going to say who it is, just in case things change. That's the thing at this stage. Although they've agreed the storyline. I've written a first draft. But because it's been put back to summer 2024, there's bags of time to do the editing, and who knows what will change in that process. So I don't want to say who the Doctor is.
Oh no, he's going to pull one of these things. I can't talk about it.
I'll tell you the title. It's called Dark Contract. Ooh. So what the Dark Contract is, you'll have to wait till...
Because that, of course, was going to be my next question. And he is going to pull this showbiz thing of saying, I can't possibly say anything else. Yeah. Will, you're a naughty Will.
I am. Well, I have to be, because I don't want to say, oh, it's this and this, and then it's not.
Oh, of course you don't. Of course you don't. But listen, the Dark Contract is on its way then for summer 2024. That's only next year at the time we're putting this out. And that's not far when you look at it, considering all the merchandise that's coming this year. So it will be another single release.
Yeah, it'll be like that. 1 hour, or an hour-long story. And this time round, I won't write 30 pages, I've learned my lesson. I'll be more concise. I have been more concise. The first draft is bang on as far as the word count goes. So it shouldn't be as lengthy a process this time. I hope it won't be, anyway. It went through 5 drafts, the resurrection plan. Hopefully Dark Contract won't be quite that.
Well, listen, you live and learn. But yeah, I have to tell you, I am looking forward to it. Really, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. And hopefully, next time you come on, you'll be able to tell me even more about it. I might even have to do a launch show with you to say, look, it's available now. And you'll be able to tell me about what Doctor it is, what companion it is, a little bit more about it. And then by then, hopefully, we can get that all launched for you and look at it. The resurrection plan, as we've been saying throughout the show, is available right now from all good stockists. You know where to go. The ISBN is 978-529-26310 if you have to order it that way. But yeah, go and have a look at it. I really, really enjoyed it. I think for you as well, Will. I can't even say anything about it. I was going to say something about it. I can't say anything about it. You have to go and listen to it because there is an almighty bit in there where you just go, okay. And it's brilliant and it's so cleverly done. Well, listen, we'll run out of time and I can't thank you enough for coming to join me on MP for this edition to talking books and your book in particular, The Resurrection Plan. I'm going to push it again there for you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed it.
And keep in touch with us here on Who's Views. We've got discussions, we've got our live stream, we've got Merchandise Paradise, and of course, we've got our Who's Views reviews, where we are celebrating Doctor Who's 60th anniversary year with a look and a discussion about many of the classic stories which ran between 1963 and 1989. Please don't forget to like and do subscribe to the channel. It would be fantastic to see you, and give us some feedback on what you think about these videos. Again, Will, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again. I'm going to get you back on. That's it now. I've got your name and number. I know where you live.
Oh no, no escape.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.